Hello and welcome to my spoiler review for Beetlejuice 2, a movie that, it does scratch that Halloween fall itch. It's not pumpkin spice the movie like the first Knives Out. I would liken it to a really beautiful Halloween sugar cookie that you see in the window or at the counter and you're like, oh, that looks good. It's so festive. And then you buy it and you're like, it actually doesn't taste that good. But you still, the whole experience of seeing it and getting it and looking at it and unwrapping it was good enough. And that's how I would describe Beetlejuice 2. We've all been there. You know what I'm talking about. I thought the movie was very rich in atmosphere, very funny at times, but also surprisingly sad with what they did with Lydia. I feel so bad for Lydia. Oh my goodness. The movie also has some very clever ideas, but unfortunately is sloppy in executing them. Again, where is the executive with the red pen who goes, you got some good stuff here, guys, but I need to make some notes. All right, so let's discuss. And this is a spoiler review, so you can go to town. You can mark it up with the red pen yourself in the comments down below. Now, there's only one element in the film that 100% I would have ripped out, and that's the bit with the baby. And I know a lot of you are like, what could be wrong with this movie, Grace? Who would ever imagine the bit with the baby? I think Beetlejuice using his powers to make Lydia pregnant, when he'd been stalking her and she's made it very clear that she does not want anything to do with him. I just really felt it crossed a line. And then the baby immediately comes to term, bursts out of her stomach in a tsunami of water, and then, being a demon baby version of Beetlejuice, no connection to Lydia at all. I'm like, isn't Lydia the mom? And then it attacks Lydia, and it starts gnawing on her leg. And at first I thought it was just gumming on her leg because it's a baby. But no, apparently it has teeth already because you can see Lydia's leg all chewed up with blood and stuff. I just thought it was very disturbing. Now, luckily, Lydia gets herself out of there pretty quickly by saying, home, home, home. I forgot that was a trick. I don't even remember that being a way to get out of the model. But anyway, it works. And she seems unfazed by the encounter. But in fact, no. She's traumatized. It's gone deep within her subconscious. Because at the end of the movie, with that ending that turns out to be a nightmare, so she has this nightmare. Well, at first it starts out like a beautiful dream that she and Astrid, we'll talk about it, but she and Astrid, are going on a trip, and Astrid sees this cute guy and gets married, and you're like, what's happening? Because everything's moving so fast, and she gets married, and then she's giving birth in this beautiful, European hospital, but who has that kind of a viewing area for that? It was all very surreal. And then she gives birth, in a lot of gore, to the Beetlejuice demon baby. And Lydia is jolted awake. And you're like, oh, thank goodness that was a nightmare. But then Beetlejuice is next to her in bed and he's like, wow, what a horrible dream. And that jolts Lydia awake again because she was in a nightmare within a nightmare. And then it reveals that she's in bed all alone. I really do feel that Lydia was someone who was being abused. And I felt just so awful that nobody was coming to her rescue. Because she's made it clear she's never been interested in Beetlejuice. She's not interested in him now. Throughout this film itself, she's telling him to go away. In the first movie, yes, Beetlejuice was a perv. Whatever. He was a harmless perv to a degree. I mean, he crossed the line, but not like he does here. Here, he's long-term harassing someone. And I feel, he's stalking Lydia here. It's revealed for 30 plus years. And I think he's done real emotional damage to her. I think that's why she can't have a healthy relationship, with someone else. And I think that there's an argument to be made that he is why she has become a quiet and timid person. And why, again, as I said, she's alone. And it's just very sad. It's very sad. She's exhibiting, I think it would be interesting to talk to to see what a professional psychiatrist viewpoint would be. But she seems to me like someone who has become very turned inward because of what's happened to her. And I just felt so bad. And then on top of that, it's revealed that her current boyfriend, Rory, and also her manager and forced fiance why does everybody want to marry poor Lydia? And she doesn't want to marry any of these guys. But it turns out he's a con artist who is only with her because she's famous and he's using her for his own fortune. And also, on top of that, so it's not just Lydia who's being preyed upon by men, but it's passed down to her daughter. Because Astrid meets this guy who seems too good to be true, and he is too good to be true, because it's revealed he's a dead guy who's not just dead, but a murderer who killed his own parents, and he tries to trick Astrid into trading places with him in the underworld so that he can go back to the world of the living. And you're like, whoa! Like, the only good guys are the dead guys, Lydia's ex and, the character of Charles. We'll talk about Jeffrey Jones a little bit. But, there's a line early on in the film where Delia says there are no men left in the Deetz family. It's a strong line. It's a powerful line, and I didn't write that line. I didn't choose to make this movie focus on the Deetz generations of women and how many of them are preyed upon consistently by men. This movie made that choice. They're forcing us to have to discuss this because, obviously it's I think it would be horrible to overlook it because so many people overlook it in real life. You'd be doing the very exact same behavior that enables this. So I think it weighs the film down and it weighs the character of Lydia down. And I don't understand why they put it in the movie, especially because they didn't do a particularly good job having this conversation that they introduced. You're like, who snuck vegetables into my Halloween cookie? But you don't even get any nutrition. But since it is in the film, since the storyline is in the film, another line that really stood out to me, again by Delia, Catherine O'Hara is so good here, is that she asked Lydia whatever happened to the tough little goth girl that she'd once been. And I thought that was such a powerful line. And I would have wished that Lydia had returned to that, at least to some degree, by the end of the film, to get her self-confidence back, to see the old Lydia. And instead, it's her daughter who has to get her out of the loophole, in the marriage contract with Beetlejuice. And Lydia just continues to be dragged around in this movie, being all stammering and, really beaten down emotionally. And I just felt horrible about that. I would have just preferred to see Lydia like she was in the original film or in the animated series, right? The closest we get to that is when she's hosting her own show. Loved that. I also love that the footage they had, the night vision. The night vision footage in that haunted house and with her old school hat that she had from when she was little. She's still wearing it, but she just so reminded me so much of Delia. I was like, you've turned into Delia, which I thought that was hilarious. I love that Delia kept saying, I wish Astrid were being nicer to you, but since you were so mean to me, I do like the irony, the delicious irony of it. I thought that was great. But I also liked it when Lydia was running around a little bit in the underworld with Beetlejuice, it's too bad, if they actually did like each other, the Beetlejuice saying they were like Bonnie and Clyde was cute, but she doesn't like Beetlejuice. So I was like, leave Lydia alone. I'm not sure why Beetlejuice had to be obsessed with Lydia. I think it works better when they are just like pals, as they were in the animated series. Or if Lydia liked him, but she doesn't like him. I have no problem with his bad boy behavior, by the way, overall. I thought that was fine. I thought in many parts of the movie it worked really well. And I loved it, for instance, when Delia, who dies, says, she's like upset that she has to wait online in the underworld. And she's like, I know people. And she realizes that in the underworld, the person she knows is Beetlejuice. And she summons him to get insider treatment. That was a great Beetlejuice interaction. And I also loved her, by the way, mentioning that she's like, does global entry work down here? And I thought that was hilarious. I thought that was so funny. I love that stuff. I think Beetlejuice works best when it highlights, the mundane of the underworld. That's how the first movie worked so well. And I think that's when this second movie also does the best. I just didn't see why he had to be harassing Lydia for 30 years. It was sad and it was not needed in the film. The movie is definitely overly complicated, which is frustrating, particularly when they have a great thread already there, which could have been a streamed down storyline with Astrid. I was like, you have it. I see it. It's right there. All right, so it seems in the Broadway musical, which I've never seen, I know some of you are a fan of it, but in the Broadway musical, Lydia's birth mother is dead and in the underworld, and Lydia very much wants to see her, and that's a subplot in the musical. Here, Lydia says her birth mother is still alive, and I'm like, then why isn't she in this movie, since you've made it a movie about the generations of the Deetz women? Whatever. But anyway, in the sequel, they take that, boop, yoink, they take that storyline from the musical and they give it to Astrid, whose father is dead. But for some reason, Lydia can see so many dead souls, but she can't see Astrid's father. And that has led Astrid to believe that her mother is a fraud with no real abilities, or else couldn't she see her father? Richard, his name is Richard, because, Lydia's actual father, Lydia's father is dead and Astrid's father is dead. And they died the same way, by the way, both going on these crazy exotic trips to, far off locales and being killed by animals or, a shark or we find out piranhas. Why would they repeat the gag and not even acknowledge that they repeated the gag? You're like, that's just, how do you not even have at least a line about that? Like, that's just so bizarre. Now, the fact that Lydia couldn't see her ex made me think that maybe her ex wasn't dead, right? But it turns out that he was dead. Again, killed by piranhas. And, the little flapping piranhas on his body got some chuckles from my audience. It was a good sight gag. And he's a clerk, it turns out, in the Underworld, and that's how they run into him. But based on the rules established in the first movie, if he's a clerk in the Underworld, doesn't that mean he committed, he killed himself? Are we going to discuss and dive into that at all? Anyway, the reason Astrid is in the Underworld in the first place, again, as I said, is that she meets this boy who is too good to be true. And I knew his parents were dead as soon as we saw them when they wouldn't show their faces. I was like, those two parents are dead, thank you very much. But I thought that they had died somehow and he had used the Book of the Dead to bring them back to life because he didn't want to let go of his parents. But apparently he really wanted to let go of them because that was a good twist that he was actually their murderer and that he had died trying to avoid the police in his treehouse, and that's how he'd fallen out. I thought that was amazing. I thought that was really, really well done. It was not only a great twist, but it reminded me a lot of so many of the great ghost stories that I'd read growing up. Like, hello, Lois Duncan. Your boyfriend's actually dead and he's a murderer. And it was such a cozy house and I just thought it was so cool. I just really liked that. I was like, this is excellent. And I liked the way it was revealed. Lydia was such a great mom. She's like, I want to go and say hi to his parents. And you're like, that's the responsible thing to do. Do you see, Astrid? She should have done it. And I like the way it was revealed through the real estate agent, bringing back the real estate agent, right? Only now it's the daughter. She's like, I just can't sell that house because of that murder that took place there. And that was all great. All right, so there's your story. Why couldn't Lydia be co-parenting with her dead ex, which would be such a Lydia thing to do? And Astrid, frustrated that she can't see her father herself, Lydia could be speaking for Richard, who's dead, and Astrid's like, did he really just side with you? I don't believe it. So she makes a deal, somehow finds out about Beetlejuice, and makes a deal to enter the underworld and look for her dad. I mean, it's all, as I said, it's right there. There's your story. You're done. Just clear away all this extra stuff. Although I did think the Monica Belluci stuff was okay. We'll talk about that. And it would, that could have been fine. That could have been your B storyline. And it would have just allowed for stronger character development as well, because they would have had more time to focus on fewer characters. Also, speaking of parenting, here the Maitlands are just dismissed. Apparently, like a lot of loopholes in this movie. They found a loophole and they moved on. But at the end of the first movie, they had basically become Lydia's babysitters. That's what they come up with, that, everybody could stay in the house together. And they were raising Lydia. And it was made very clear that they were doing actually a really nice job. And they were making her a more well-rounded, well-adjusted person. And I think it would have been nice, especially since, again, Lydia is dealing with being a parent herself, to reflect on how the Maitlands had helped to shape Lydia. That she was not only very much Delia, but also very much Adam and Barbara. I don't know. These things are all right there. I also feel strongly that the movie did not need Charles, because every time they referenced him, it just reminded me of the horrible, immoral, illegal things that he did, which is why he can't be in the sequel. Like, the claymation sequence was cute, but the whole time you're like, you're making me look at a guy who's an absolutely disgusting person. Like, why are you putting him in this movie? Claymation, in any form. Even just hearing like what was supposed to be his voice. I didn't like it being just constantly brought up and put in there. I thought he could have died and moved on, just like the Maitlands apparently did. I think that would have been better. I did like the gag where he was missing the top half due to the shark attack and he ran into someone who was missing their bottom half due to a shark attack. But you could have done that with Richard. And he had the top half and you ran into someone with only the bottom half. But that was a fun gag. And then also, I do think it was funny when Delia finally saw him at the end and he's missing the whole top half of his body. But Delia is like, oh, Charles, did you see what happened to me? And she just has this cute little snake bite. It was such a Delia thing to do. But no, they could have done it with somebody else somehow. It wasn't worth the constant Jeffrey Jones references. You're like, why do you keep bringing this guy up? He's horrible. We just got to do away with him. Also, one last missed opportunity. At the end, when Lydia decided to take Astrid on that trip that Richard had promised to like all the scariest or most haunted places on earth, including Dracula's castle, and that's where Astrid meets this cute guy and gets married and has a baby. Before all that stuff with Beetlejuice's demon baby happened, I thought that Astrid had accidentally married Dracula. And I was like, oh, are we going to do like a live action Hotel Transylvania? What a great setup for going forward with this franchise. Like those Deetz ladies indeed, first Beetlejuice and the undead, and now Dracula's going to come into the mix. I thought that would have been fun, but no, they just got so distracted with the callback to the Beetlejuice demon baby. Again, missed opportunity. Now, while the script is a mess, the movie is so rich in atmosphere that it's a wonderful distraction. You're like, what a mess, but what a beautiful movie. It's just so incredibly well crafted production-wise from top to bottom, and also costume and makeup. The town in Connecticut looks amazing. I love the opening credit sequence flying through the town at night with the streets just wet from having just recently rained. Also, because that's how you film better at night. You wet everything down. It's a filming trick. But then slowly going, it starts out as the real town, but then also eventually it's a model with like the model cows on the hill. I thought that was great. And the whole time, Danny Elfman's iconic score, but plussed somehow. You're like, how is this even better? You didn't think you could improve on the first score, but you would apparently be wrong because the score is even better. I just thought that was an incredible opening. I was like, oh man. And then also the Maitland house, just as we remembered it, inside and out. They did a wonderful job recreating those spaces. And they turned out so well. It was a good mix of the bones of I watch a lot of real estate shows, particularly $1 Million Listing LA. So I'm like, oh, you really used the bones of the house, but yet there was a lot of Delia in there, but with like in a respectful way. Like I think she did improve the house. I was like, that's a nice house. I thought it was great. I loved the makeover, the remodeling. And also, I thought shrouding the house in like a black shroud for the funeral, I actually thought that was a great artistic choice. I was like, Delia, you really have something here. It really spoke to me. I thought that was phenomenal. And then the Fraser murder house. Oh, it looked so great. It was both cozy and really creepy at the same time. I thought that was really well done. I was like, oh, this is so Halloween-y. I love it. And then, of course, we went back to the Underworld, which, by the way, we entered with this artist who was leaving Delia's exhibit because it had been canceled due to Charles's death. But he died the exact same way that Joe does in Pixar's Soul, falling down a manhole. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, you just ripped off Soul, and that's a different studio. But I thought that the Underworld was great, largely due to the impressive makeup and costuming and practical effects. It just felt like you were at a really fantastic Halloween party. Just so many great elements. Which were the ones that stood out to you? The ones that I particularly liked was I loved that skeleton woman at the switchboard. I mean, that she was kind of like moving really fake-like. It seemed almost a little bit also like a ride. She was like, yes, I'll connect you. And, I just loved it for some reason. I just thought that was great. And then also the ghost police squad in their costumes, like their motorcycle cop costumes. I was like, I like that. They had a little YMCA action going there too. It felt like, I just thought that was great. Willem Dafoe was fine. It wasn't anything we haven't seen before in other projects, but I appreciated how much he committed to the character in the movie. It worked in that regard. And did they actually make a fake Willem Dafoe? When he froze, I was like, I think that's a plaster, fake Willem Dafoe. I don't think that's Willem Dafoe standing still. I wondered if he was going to shatter because they built that, but it didn't. So I wondered why he couldn't I'm like, Willem, I'm paying you a lot of money. You can't stand still for like 15 seconds. And then, of course, Beetlejuice. Michael Keaton is amazing here. In some ways, even better than the first film because he's given more material and more characters to interact with. Again, that Delia interaction was one of my favorites. I love that he says, oh, now that you're dead, you want to hang out with me. I loved it. And my audience cheered. Oh, how we cheered when it was revealed that he was the one who defeated Jeremy at the very last minute. Jeremy thought he got his passport stamped and he was going up top, but Beetlejuice got him. That was great. That's when I think Beetlejuice, again, the mundacity and also Beetlejuice, he's like, it's almost like Ghostbusters and Alien are supposed to be about plumbers and exterminators like that. And, that's what Beetlejuice is, but for the undead. And I think that's when those all movies came out around the same time, by the way, which is interesting. The 80s, the working man in genre film. But that's when it works best. And also the psychiatrist scene, minus the baby, I like that stuff as well. And then that crazy wedding sequence, it's just really haunted me, in fact. Like here, he has Lydia and their entire wedding party lip syncing to this crazy song about a cake in the rain and losing the recipe. And I was like, that can't be a real song. And I actually was talking to my parents about the movie, and they're like, no, that's a real song called MacArthur Park. And I was like, what? So I Googled it, and it's sung by Mr. Richard Harris, thank you very much, aka Dumbledore, which is also a Warner Brothers movie, by the way. And I'm like, the synergy, this is nuts. And it's just, again, I was like, the lyrics for some reason have really stuck with me. I'm like, this is just insane. And it's a breakup song. So I don't know why Beetlejuice would want to sing it at a wedding, because he didn't know that they had found a loophole to get out of that wedding contract. But it's just such a bizarre sequence, and it goes on for so long, and everyone's just so committed to it, that it just really resonated with me, even though it's not as fun as the Deo sequence in the original film that it's supposed to be a callback to. Like, it's not a great, big, fun musical number, but again, as I said, it's more haunting. And did they put lips on that cake? Was that cake singing at one point? The cake also looked disgusting. I was like, I don't want a slice of that. Ugh. I also want to take a moment to talk specifically about Delia and Lydia, because they fascinated me. You know, for a movie that I think is about women, it was so great to see that they had thrived. And again, we've discussed it in a lot of recent Hollywood nostalgia plays. They have characters brought back and they're all doing really horribly. But here, these two women, not only had Lydia grown up to be very much like Delia, which I thought was really funny, but they'd both become two such successful artists. And I thought that was so great to see. And I thought both of their art both spoke to me. Lydia's show, I thought it was fantastic. I thought the set on the soundstage was amazing. Not only recreating the Maitlands attic, but all the stars that they had around the set. I was like, that's a great set. And that, I liked that Lydia had become a medium, but she was such a nice girl who had wanted to help the Maitlands and people. I'm surprised she didn't continue wanting to help people, but instead had come to view it as a burden. And that she was just being manipulated by her boyfriend/manager to do this show, but in fact, she just wanted to take pills to make her abilities go away. It was so sad. I was like, Lydia, when we first met her, would have loved this for herself. That she would be someone who would commune with the dead and help them and, and be that bridge. The fact that she had come to see it as a burden was not only sad, but totally unexplained. And then also Delia, so successful as an artist. I loved it. She had given an art center to Astrid's school, and that's where some of her sculptures from the first movie were. They were like the Deetz Art Center, and I was like, you go, Delia. I thought that was phenomenal. And I thought that while Delia's artwork was still a little bit out there, I started to see the method to her madness. Like, her artwork was speaking to me. Maybe it's because I've been seeing more modern art exhibits in real life, and I'm like, I'm like, okay, clearly this person got an exhibit for a reason. Let me try and understand why. And some of the pieces there have spoken to me. This art installation on this roof at the Met really spoke to me. This, not all the pieces, but I liked the spider. I was like, that's really cool. And that could have totally come out of Beetlejuice, and that's a real life sculpture. So I really liked Delia's work, and I thought some of her ideas were silly, but some were good. Like capturing a scream of anguish. I mean, it was a crazy way to do it, but I was like, I'd like to see the pictures, Delia. I actually thought it was a good idea. So I thought that was a lot of fun. She had actually become, I think, a valid artist. But those asps, the snake that killed Cleopatra, of course, so Delia. But as soon as they arrived in the mail and she was like, they've been defanged, I was like, Delia, those haven't been defanged. I knew where they were going with it. And sure enough, yes, Delia dies. But I thought it was funny that one consolation she had, Astrid's like, well, your artwork's going to go up in value. And Delia was like, oh yeah, that's nice. She and Charles went to the great beyond. I can't see Delia going to the great beyond. And it would mean that Lydia and Astrid would no longer be able to communicate with her. So I'm not quite sure why they chose that for Delia. But that was an interesting curveball. I really loved what they did with Delia. Finally, Monica Belluci and Beetlejuice's backstory. To be honest, I don't need to know Beetlejuice's origin story. I don't know if you could ever come up with something that would be satisfying, considering how bigger than life the character is. I wish that he had just met Delores when they were both already dead, to be honest with you. I mean, she's stunning. I mean, Beetlejuice hits on everything. You think he wouldn't be going after Delores? I mean, like, I don't need this to be explained to me. I see Beetlejuice, I see Delores, I go, oh yeah. She looks beautiful, stunning. And she's really, once again, Tim Burton's dream girl, right? This type that he's created. And he swaps out who's playing her, in his work and in real life every couple of years. You guys pointed out it's actually 4 women with Lisa Marie, right? I think one of you said it might even be 5. But his personal life aside, right, he's come up with a pretty good formula here. I think it's interesting. And the only reason it's no longer that unique is because he's just used it so many times already. But you know what? I still kind of think it's cool. So I liked it. It was very much like Michelle Pfeiffer and Catwoman, and I miss that character. And I actually loved it when Beetlejuice set Delores up with Rory. And I mean, not only do they make an amazing couple, I was like, yes! Couple goals. They're perfect for each other. Good work, Beetlejuice. But I love the t-shirt, when Beetlejuice snapped his fingers and Rory's shirt came off to reveal a t-shirt underneath that said, I heart Delores. It was hilarious, not only because it was good sight gag, but also because Delores was like, do you? Like, it worked. Delores fell for it. She was like, oh, okay, fan club. I thought that was great. She was a little Veronica Lodgy. I thought that was fantastic. I hope that sandworm didn't kill them, but Beetlejuice survived a sandworm in the first movie, so I like their odds. So that's my spoiler review of Beetlejuice 2. A mess of a script, but still a really charming movie. Great for Halloween, so atmospheric, very funny. I just feel really particularly bad about what happened to Lydia. She went from being the heart of the first film to being like someone really sad. It was just it was sad to see all this fun chaos going on. And then in the middle of it, or actually not in the middle of it, on the outskirts of it, you see someone who's kind of their soul has been destroyed. And you're like, why isn't anybody helping Lydia? It was just very sad to see. When in the first movie and in the animated series, she was the life of the party. She was leading the charge. So to see that happen to Lydia was really sad. To think, when I knew you as a little girl and I know what happened to you as an adult. And it was sad. All right, so what did you think? This is the spoiler review. Go to town. I'd be very curious to hear your comments. What did you like? What would you fix? How do you think the movie can definitely be improved? But so how would you do it? What were the standout moments to you? Share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.